Excuse me, girl. This isn't the welfare line. First class is for people who actually paid for a ticket. The words sliced through the cabin like a cold gust of wind. Flight attendant Janelle Parker stood over the poised black woman in seat 2A, her hand planted on the headrest as if guarding sacred territory. Conversations froze. A few passengers glanced over their reading glasses, others lifted their phones, sensing drama. The woman in the seat didn't flinch. She slowly lifted her eyes from her tablet, calm, steady, unbothered. "I have a first-class ticket," she said, voice low but firm. Her tone wasn't defensive and it was simply factual. Janelle snatched the boarding pass from her fingers with an exaggerated scoff, lifting it toward the cabin lights as if she expected to find invisible ink. Sure you do," she muttered loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. She shoved the ticket back against the woman's chest, hard enough to make the sound echo. "Try again. Coach is in the back." A ripple of whispers passed through first class. The woman inhaled slowly, smoothing the lapel of her tailored suit. A glint from her wrist, a sleek luxury timepiece, caught the attention of a businessman across the aisle. He stared but said nothing. Have you ever been underestimated so deeply that people fail to recognize the power sitting right in front of them? 10 minutes until scheduled takeoff. "I have a first-class ticket," the woman repeated, offering her boarding pass again, this time placing it gently on the tray table, refusing to let the attendant snatch it from her hands. Janelle spun around, raising her voice even higher. "Attention, everyone! We've got another one trying to sneak into first class!" Phones started lifting. A few passengers chuckled. A couple shook their heads. The woman remained still, almost eerily composed, reaching calmly into her purse. A solid black card slipped into view for a moment, catching the eye of a young woman in row 3 who gasped softly. Janelle didn't notice. She was too busy flipping her phone into selfie mode. "Hey guys," she said to her live stream. "We've got drama today. Some lady thinks she owns the jet or something." If only she knew how close she was to the truth. Security was already being called. Passengers were choosing sides. And in less than 10 minutes, everyone on that plane would regret underestimating the woman in seat 2A. What the flight attendant didn't know was this. The woman she was humiliating did own the jet. And she was minutes away from firing the entire crew. The jet bridge rattled as 2 airport security officers marched toward the cabin, their heavy footsteps echoing like a countdown. The tension inside first class thickened. Phones lifted higher, whispers turned sharper. Flight attendant Janelle didn't wait. She tapped her headset dramatically. "Security to first class. Passenger refusing to move to coach," she announced, making sure every single traveler heard. A businessman across the aisle muttered, "Happens all the time. Some people just don't know their place." The woman in 2A still didn't move, not an inch. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, her phone glowing softly with 3 unread messages, from contacts labeled Assistant, Legal, and Board Chairman. But no one nearby realized the weight those names carried. When the officers boarded, Officer Ricks, tall, broad, and impatient, didn't even look at the boarding pass. He addressed Janelle first, like she was the one in charge. "What's the issue?" "This passenger is in a first-class seat she didn't pay for," Janelle said, folding her arms triumphantly. "She's becoming disruptive by refusing to move." The woman finally lifted her gaze. "Disruptive?" she repeated quietly. "I've been sitting here since boarding." Officer Ricks didn't bother hiding his suspicion. "Ma'am, we need you to take your things and follow us off the plane." A hush spread across the cabin as the businessman in 1C started recording again, whispering eagerly into his phone. "This is unbelievable. They're escorting her off. Unreal." But the woman didn't stand. Instead, she reached into her blazer pocket with slow, deliberate grace. Passengers leaned forward, curious. An elderly couple stiffened. Janelle smirked, expecting a useless protest. What came out was not what they expected. A small black leather card holder, minimalist, elegant, expensive. She slid a single card out and placed it face down on the tray table. "Before you make a mistake that will cost several people their jobs," she said calmly, "you'll want the captain to review this personally." Janelle scoffed. "Lady, the captain doesn't have time to coddle you." That's fine, the woman said, with a serene confidence that unsettled even the passengers watching. But he'll make time when he sees that card. Officer Ricks stepped forward again. Ma'am, final warning. The woman didn't blink. Officer, she said softly, you're attempting to remove the legal owner of this aircraft from her own jet. A few passengers laughed nervously, but the young woman in 3B, who had caught a glimpse of the card's gold lettering, covered her mouth in shock. She'd recognized the logo instantly. Everything was about to explode. When the captain finally arrives and flips over that mysterious black card, the entire cabin will shift from arrogance to absolute panic. The cabin grew still, painfully still, as the woman's words echoed through first class. You're attempting to remove the owner of this aircraft from her own jet. Most people assumed she was bluffing. A few passengers snickered. But the young Latina woman in 3B, who had glimpsed the embossed logo on that hidden card, wasn't laughing. Officer Ricks frowned, trying to mask his confusion. Ma'am, that's a serious claim. Let's not make this harder. Before he could finish, a voice sliced through the tension. What's going on in my cabin? Every head snapped toward the front as Captain Alvarez stepped inside. His crisp uniform and no-nonsense stride carried the authority only 25 years in aviation can produce. Even Janelle straightened instinctively, smoothing her uniform. Captain, perfect timing, she chirped. This woman is refusing to move and is holding up takeoff. Captain Alvarez lifted a hand, silencing her. His eyes shifted to the woman in seat 2A, calm, elegant, unmoving, and something about her demeanor made him tread more carefully. Ma'am, he said, may I see your boarding pass? She gestured gracefully to the tray table. It's right there, Captain, along with something you need to read first. The captain picked up the boarding pass, scanned it, and frowned. Seat 2A, purchased 3 days ago, verified. He turned to Janelle. She did buy this ticket. Janelle reddened, but kept her posture firm. Well, Captain, people forge documents. I was just doing my job. The captain ignored her and flipped over the black card the woman had placed face down, and the moment he read it, his entire expression changed. Color drained from his face. His breath hitched. His shoulders stiffened. Passengers watched in confusion as the captain stared at the card like it was a live grenade. Because on that card was a title that carried more authority than anyone on that plane, except its owner. Dr. Alexa Morgan, founder and chief executive officer, Morgan Aerofleet Holdings. Primary contractor and lessor for Executive Aviation Group. If the airline industry were a kingdom, Morgan Aerofleet was one of its financial pillars, providing private jets, leasing aircraft, and funding aviation infrastructure worldwide. Meaning this wasn't just a wealthy passenger. This was the person who owned the very jet they were standing in. Captain Alvarez swallowed hard and stepped back. Dr. Morgan, I had no idea. Clearly, she replied softly. Janelle blinked. What? That doesn't mean anything. Anyone can print a card. The captain snapped around so fast she flinched. Janelle, not another word. Passengers murmured, some gasping, others whispering. Is she serious? She owns the jet? Oh my God. We're dead. Officer Ricks took a slow step back, realizing just how badly this had gone. And Dr. Alexa Morgan? She simply sat there, powerful, patient, and in complete control. The captain is about to make a call to headquarters, and what he learns will turn this embarrassing incident into a career-ending disaster for the entire crew. Captain Alvarez stared at the black card in his hand as if it were a detonator, and in a way, it was. He cleared his throat, stepped back from Dr. Alexa Morgan, and turned toward Officer Ricks. Officer, stand down. No removal, no escalation. Not another step toward this passenger. Ricks nodded slowly, realizing he'd nearly dragged the owner of the jet off her own aircraft. His face paled several shades. But Janelle, still clinging to her false confidence, scoffed loudly. Oh, come on, Captain. You're not seriously buying this. She's clearly lying. That card is probably from a print shop. Passengers winced. Even the businessman recording muttered, She just doesn't know when to stop. Captain Alvarez shot her a warning look. Janelle, enough. She opened her mouth again, about to dig herself deeper, but the captain raised a hand sharply. I'm making a call to operations. No one moves until I return. He stepped toward the cockpit, but Dr. Morgan spoke before he took 2 steps. Captain. He paused instantly. You might want to use your secured line. This isn't something you want the general crew hearing. Her voice was calm, polite, yet carried the kind of authority that made even the engines feel quieter. Alvarez disappeared behind the cockpit door, and a hush fell over first class. For 30 long seconds, nothing happened, then muffled voices, then silence, then the sound of someone pacing. Passengers exchanged looks, worried, embarrassed, curious. Janelle folded her arms, muttering under her breath, "Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous." But then the cockpit door swung open. Captain Alvarez's face said everything. His expression wasn't just pale, it was the look of a man who had just gotten a career-defining phone call. He approached slowly, as if approaching royalty. "Dr. Morgan," he said, voice tight, "I just spoke with Executive Aviation Group." Janelle leaned forward smugly. "And they confirmed she's—" They confirmed, Alvarez interrupted, "that Dr. Alexa Morgan is who she says she is, and more." The cabin buzzed with whispers. More? What does that mean? Who is she? Alvarez inhaled shakily. She isn't just the CEO of Morgan Aerofleet. She isn't just a major aviation investor. She is, he exhaled, the woman whose corporation owns this aircraft and 13 others in our fleet. Gasps erupted. The young Latina woman in 3B whispered, "I knew it. I knew that logo." The businessman in 1C nearly dropped his phone. "Oh, we're in trouble. We're in so much trouble." But Janelle? Her confidence shattered like glass. No, that's impossible," she stammered. "That can't be true. If she owned the jet, she would have— Dr. Morgan lifted her chin slightly. "If I wanted to prove who I am, Janelle, I could have done it in 10 seconds, she paused. "I wanted to see how far you would take your assumptions." Silence swept across the cabin. Captain Alvarez swallowed hard. "And headquarters wants me to address this immediately. Headquarters has already reviewed the live streams, and what they tell the captain next will destroy every shred of authority his crew thought they had." Captain Alvarez stood frozen in the aisle, clutching his tablet the way a sinking man clings to driftwood. Every passenger could feel that something irreversible had already happened behind that cockpit door. He cleared his throat once, then twice, but his voice still wavered. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began softly, "I've just spoken to executive leadership. They were already aware of this incident." Janelle frowned. "How? I didn't send anything to them." Alvarez turned his eyes toward her, and the look should have warned her to stop talking. "Because," he said slowly, "your livestream reached over 400 viewers in under 5 minutes, and several passengers uploaded clips to multiple platforms." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The businessman in 1C whispered, "I might have uploaded mine too fast." The elderly man beside him scolded softly, "Son, she just lost her job." But no one was ready for what came next. The captain continued, tone grim. "Headquarters reviewed all streams in real time. They confirmed serious violations of, well, just about every policy we have." Janelle swallowed hard. "No, that can't be right. I was doing my job." Officer Ricks shifted uncomfortably. "You were streaming passengers, ma'am. That alone is—" "I don't need you to defend her!" a woman in 1D snapped. The tension flared again, but then Dr. Alexa Morgan gently raised a hand, silencing everyone with nothing but quiet poise. "Captain," she said, "what exactly did headquarters say?" Alvarez hesitated, clearly struggling to package the explosion into a polite message. "They said, and I'm quoting, 'We have a catastrophic breach of professionalism, probable discriminatory conduct, and a potential PR nightmare involving the owner of our aircraft.'" Murmurs erupted. Janelle's knees looked like they might buckle. "But that's not all," Alvarez added. "Legal and operations executives are on a conference call right now, analyzing whether this crew can remain on duty for this flight." The businessman filming whispered, "Oh, this is about to get nuclear." Dr. Morgan leaned forward slightly. "And what was their preliminary decision?" The captain exhaled. "Dr. Morgan, They said the final decision is yours. The cabin turned into stunned silence. Janelle's jaw fell open. You mean, she gets to decide if we stay employed? Alvarez nodded, face drawn. That's correct. Janelle stared at Dr. Morgan like she was seeing a ghost wearing a tailored suit. But why would they do that? Dr. Morgan didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She didn't posture. She simply answered in the same calm tone she'd held since the beginning. Because I own the jet. And my company pays your airline to operate it. A pause. And because actions have consequences. One of the passengers whispered, Lord, she's about to fire them right here. And they weren't wrong. Headquarters is calling back. And their next instruction gives Dr. Morgan full disciplinary power, right as the entire crew stands trembling in front of her. The cabin lights flickered as the intercom chimed, a signal that someone was calling the cockpit again. Captain Alvarez's tablet buzzed violently in his hand. He glanced at the screen, and the moment he read the caller ID, his posture straightened. Headquarters again, he muttered, except this time the call wasn't from operations. It was from corporate risk and legal oversight, the department no pilot ever wants to hear from mid-flight. He answered instantly. Yes, Director. Understood. Yes, she's here. Yes, I'll put you on speaker. He turned the volume up. A crisp, authoritative voice filled the cabin. Dr. Morgan, this is Senior Legal Director Holloway. First, allow me to apologize for what you've experienced aboard your own aircraft. Passengers froze. Janelle covered her face with both hands. Even Officer Ricks straightened like a soldier in formation. Dr. Morgan nodded once, calm as ever. I appreciate the acknowledgement. What do you intend to do about it? Holloway didn't hesitate. Per your leasing agreement, Morgan Aerofleet reserves the right to evaluate and dismiss contracted crew working aboard any aircraft you own. Since your company funds and provides the jet, disciplinary authority defaults to you during in-flight incidents. A stunned whisper rolled across the cabin. She really can fire them! Holloway continued. Captain Alvarez will remain, as he did not initiate the conflict. But as for the rest of the crew involved in the escalation... Janelle's breath caught. You have full authority to impose immediate suspension, removal, or termination. Janelle stumbled backward, gripping the galley counter for support. This can't be happening, she whispered. Holloway's voice sharpened. We've already watched the live stream footage Ms. Parker broadcast. The discriminatory remarks, the aggressive tone, the physical contact with a passenger, all fully documented. Gasps. Phones lifted again. Dr. Morgan folded her hands neatly. Director Holloway, thank you. Please stand by. Alvarez tapped the tablet to mute the call. He turned to face her, eyes full of dreaded anticipation. Dr. Morgan, he said quietly. They're waiting for your decision. Janelle stepped forward desperately. Please, just listen. I didn't mean any harm. I didn't know who you were. I was just trying to... Dr. Morgan raised one eyebrow. You were trying to embarrass a passenger in front of an audience, she said. You were trying to create content, not provide service. Janelle's lip trembled. But it was just a mistake. Mistakes don't go viral, Dr. Morgan replied. The entire crew stood lined up now. 2 flight attendants, a service manager, and Officer Ricks, all silent, waiting for judgment. Passers leaned forward in anticipation. You own the jet, someone whispered. Do it. She deserves it. But Dr. Morgan wasn't impulsive. She was strategic, and as she looked at the trembling crew, her voice was steady, almost too steady. I've made my decision. Every person in first class held their breath. Dr. Morgan is about to issue her first order, and the explosive fallout will shake the entire crew before the plane even leaves the gate. Dr. Alexa Morgan rose slowly from her seat, not dramatically, not angrily, but with the measured confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime commanding boardrooms where billions moved with a signature. Every passenger leaned in. Every crew member stiffened. Even the hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed to quiet itself. She stepped into the aisle, facing the trembling row of employees who only minutes earlier dismissed her like an inconvenience. Her voice was calm, Her posture was regal, her authority was absolute. "Captain Alvarez," she said, "thank you for maintaining professionalism under pressure. You will remain in command of this flight." Relief washed over his face, briefly. Then she turned to the others. Janelle Parker, the flight attendant who sparked this entire disaster, looked like someone awaiting a verdict from a judge. Dr. Morgan studied her for a long, cold moment. "You slapped my boarding pass into my chest," she began softly. "Called me a fraud, accused me of stealing identification, and tried to publicly humiliate me on a live stream." Janelle's eyes shimmered with panic. I wasn't thinking. I swear I didn't mean." "That," Dr. Morgan cut in, "is precisely the problem." She raised her chin slightly. "My company expects employees on my aircraft to think, to observe, to verify, to treat every passenger with dignity, whether they're wealthy or not." Janelle swallowed. And then it happened. "Ms. Parker, you are hereby removed from duty effective immediately. You will not operate another flight leased by my company." A collective gasp erupted through the cabin. Janelle's face crumpled, a devastating blend of disbelief and shame. "No, please, you can't." But Dr. Morgan had already shifted her gaze to the second flight attendant, the one who stood silently behind Janelle the whole time. "You allowed the situation to escalate unchecked," she said calmly. "You reinforced false assumptions. You supported discriminatory behavior through inaction." The attendant's voice cracked. I didn't know what to do." "Then you should not be responsible for the safety of passengers." The attendant's knees buckled. "You are suspended pending retraining and review." Next, she turned to Officer Ricks, the security officer who attempted to remove her without verifying a single document. "Officer," she said, "you followed a report without investigation. That is dangerous in your line of work." Ricks bowed his head. "You're right, ma'am. I should have checked." "You should have," she said. "Therefore, you are temporarily removed from duty aboard any aircraft contracted under my fleet until further training certification." Ricks nodded, accepting it like a man taking a hard but deserved blow. Passengers murmured approval. But Dr. Morgan wasn't finished. She looked toward the service manager, who had stood silently watching the disaster unfold. "And you," she said quietly, "failed to intervene at any point." His mouth fell open. "Dr. Morgan, please! I was trying to—" "You were trying to protect yourself," she corrected, "not your passengers." Her conclusion was cutting, but fair. "You are relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight." Silence. Deep, heavy silence. This was no meltdown, no emotional outburst, no revenge. This was a CEO administering corporate justice with the precision of a surgeon. And then she returned to her seat, composed, calm, and entirely in control. But as the disgraced crew gathers their things, Dr. Morgan's phone lights up, and the message she receives will ignite an even bigger shockwave through the airline. As the disgraced crew quietly gathered their belongings, shame weighing on their shoulders heavier than any flight manual, the cabin exhaled in stunned silence. Passengers exchanged looks, some shocked, some impressed, some unexpectedly proud of the calm woman in 2A who had just reshaped their entire understanding of accountability. But then, Dr. Morgan's phone buzzed. Not a normal notification, not a casual text. This was the unique triple ping alert reserved only for top-tier corporate emergencies, the kind that usually involved multi-million-dollar contracts, fleet grounding decisions, or confidential boardroom crises. She glanced at the screen. The sender. Aerofleet HQ, Executive Division. The subject line, Immediate Action Required, Contract Status. Her expression shifted, just slightly, enough for the passengers closest to her to notice. The businessman in 1C leaned forward and whispered to his wife, "Something big is happening right now, bigger than anything we've seen." Dr. Morgan opened the message. Her eyes scanned the text. Her fingers tightened ever so slightly on the phone. And then she gave a small, thoughtful exhale. Whatever she had read, it wasn't good news for the airline. She pressed a button. Within seconds, 3 people joined the call, her CFO, her legal counsel, and the VP of Fleet Operations. "Dr. Morgan," her CFO began. Based on the live stream footage and the escalation, the board is requesting your recommendation regarding our contract renewal with Global Air. Passengers stiffened. Global Air, the very company operating this aircraft, was suddenly on the brink of losing its most valuable jet contracts. The CFO continued. The board wants to know whether you wish to proceed with standard renewal next quarter, or if we should begin transitioning your aircraft to a competing carrier who aligns better with our dignity and service protocols. The words struck like a thunderbolt. Even Captain Alvarez subtly stepped closer, trying to listen without appearing intrusive. Dr. Morgan lifted her head. Every passenger in a 10-foot radius held their breath. She spoke with the same soft power she had used all day, but now with the authority of a woman whose decision could topple a corporate giant. I will give you my answer, she said, after this flight concludes. But tell the board this. The events that happened today will absolutely influence my recommendation. Her CFO's voice tightened. Understood, and Dr. Morgan, whatever you decide will be supported unanimously. She ended the call. The cabin was silent. Passengers stared at her, some in awe, some in fear, some with newfound respect. Even the newly fired crew members froze in the aisle, realizing what was really at stake. It wasn't just their jobs. It was the airline's survival. Dr. Morgan calmly placed her phone on her tray table. Captain, she said softly, we can continue when you're ready. But the captain wasn't ready. He was terrified. The captain now knows one choice from Dr. Morgan could bankrupt the airline, and he's about to beg her for a chance to save the company. Captain Alvarez stood frozen at the front of the cabin, the weight of Dr. Morgan's phone call pressing down on him like an avalanche. He understood exactly what her conversation meant, even if she didn't spell it out. If she pulled her 14 leased jets from Global Air's fleet, if she redirected her contracts to a competitor, if she recommended non-renewal to her board, the entire airline could collapse, and every member of the crew knew it. He swallowed hard and approached her seat, his voice low, respectful to the point of reverence. Dr. Morgan, may I speak with you privately? She gestured to the aisle. You may speak here, Captain. Transparency is best. Every passenger straightened in their seat, front row witnesses to a corporate earthquake. Alvarez nodded slowly, gathering his courage. Dr. Morgan, I know today has been unacceptable. What you experienced was not service. It was bias, poor judgment, and a breach of ethics. He paused. And if Global Air loses your jet contracts, we lose nearly a third of our operational fleet. A murmured wave of shock spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Even the recently fired attendants lifted their heads in horrified realization. Dr. Morgan listened silently. Alvarez continued. I am not asking for leniency on behalf of the crew. You've already made your decisions, and I support them. He took a breath. But thousands of employees depend on these aircraft leases. Ground crew, maintenance techs, pilots, schedulers, families. His voice cracked. These are good people, hard-working people, and they had nothing to do with what happened here today. For the first time since boarding, Dr. Morgan's expression softened, barely, but enough to show she heard the sincerity. The captain pressed on. If you end the contracts, the airline might not survive the hit. Entire departments could be eliminated. He lowered his eyes. I'm asking you not as a captain, but as someone who's given his life to aviation. Please consider giving Global Air one chance to correct its failures. A soft gasp came from row 3. Passengers weren't just watching a confrontation now, they were witnessing a man try to save an entire company. Dr. Morgan leaned back slightly, her gaze steady. Captain, she said gently, I appreciate your honesty and your loyalty to your people. He lifted his eyes. But understand something, she continued. My responsibility today isn't to the airline, it's to accountability. She let the silence stretch. One crew's misconduct won't destroy Global Air, she said slowly, but corporate culture might. The captain bowed his head, absorbing her words like truth he'd tried to ignore for years. What happens next? Dr. Morgan finished. Depends entirely on whether your airline proves it can change, starting today. Passengers nodded, murmuring their approval. The fate of the airline now hung by a thread, and Dr. Morgan held the scissors. Just when the cabin thinks the worst is over, Dr. Morgan calls her legal team, and what she asks them to prepare next will send the airline into full-blown crisis mode. Most passengers believed the worst of the storm had passed. They were wrong, because as soon as Captain Alvarez stepped aside, giving Dr. Alexa Morgan space to breathe, her phone buzzed again. This time with a message labeled, "Legal. Document draft ready for review." The title alone made the nearest passenger's stomachs drop. Dr. Morgan opened the file. Her legal team didn't send simple memos. They sent weapons, and this one was a nuclear device waiting to be activated. It was titled, Notice of Contract Re-Evaluation and Immediate Compliance Inquiry, Global Air. She scanned the first few lines, her expression tightening slightly. Not with anger, but with razor-sharp focus. Every paragraph identified specific clauses in the leasing agreement Global Air had violated by allowing discriminatory crew behavior aboard a privately owned aircraft. The businessman in 1C saw the heading on her screen, nearly choking on his breath. "Oh, dear Lord. They're about to get sued into the Stone Age," he whispered. A nervous ripple moved through first class. The recently fired attendant, Janelle, murmured shakily, "What? It's legal paperwork. She's not really going to—" But her sentence faded as Dr. Morgan tapped her screen and began a call with her head counsel. The lawyer answered immediately. "Dr. Morgan, the draft is ready. You can file it the moment you land. Do you want us to proceed?" Passengers nearby sat frozen, listening. Dr. Morgan replied calmly, "I want contingency plans prepared. If Global Air fails to implement immediate corrective action, I want every contractual exit route outlined." Her attorney responded, "Understood. That means we prepare grounds for suspension, removal, and reassignment of your entire fleet of leased aircraft." The businessman in 1C whispered, "She's about to move 14 jets. 14 jets." Even Officer Ricks, temporarily removed from duty, looked faint. The lawyer continued, "One more thing. Considering the live stream exposure, press outlets will likely reach out for comment. Would you like us to issue a statement preemptively?" Dr. Morgan paused. Her eyes drifted toward Captain Alvarez, a good man struggling under a broken system, then toward the trembling ex-crew whose arrogance had shattered their careers. "No," she said at last. "No public statement yet. I want to see how Global Air responds in the next hour. Their reaction will determine the future of our partnership." The lawyer's voice dropped. "And if they fail to respond appropriately?" Dr. Morgan's answer was calm, cold, final. "Then I will end the partnership entirely." A wave of shock moved through the cabin. Passengers whispered in awe. "She can do that?" "She can cripple the airline. Forget firing a team. She might sink the whole company." Dr. Morgan ended the call and placed her phone down gently, like a judge lowering a gavel. And then she said something that froze the blood of every employee still on board. "Let's see if Global Air is capable of reform, or if I need to replace them." But just as Dr. Morgan finishes speaking, the captain receives another message, one so urgent and alarming that even Dr. Morgan looks surprised. Captain Alvarez returned from the cockpit, tablet in hand, his face even more strained than before. He looked like a man carrying the weight of an entire airline on his shoulders, because in a way, he was. He stopped beside Dr. Morgan's seat. "Dr. Morgan," he said quietly, "we've received another communication from headquarters. This one is marked Red Level Priority." A hush fell over first class. Even passengers who had been whispering fell silent, sensing the air shift again. The calm before another corporate thunderstrike. Dr. Morgan gestured for him to continue. "Go on, Captain." He took a slow breath. "This message isn't from operations, or legal, or the executive office." He glanced around nervously, as if making sure everyone heard him clearly. "It's from the Global Air Board of Directors." A ripple of shock tore through the cabin. The board never contacted flight crew directly, ever. Janelle, standing pale-faced in the galley, whispered to herself, "Oh no, oh no, the board knows." Alvarez tapped the tablet and handed it toward Dr. Morgan. "Permission to show you the message?" She nodded. He turned the screen so she, and half the cabin, could read the subject line. Immediate mitigation plan, Dr. Morgan incident. Passengers gasped. The airline had already labeled the event after her, like a corporate disaster, and it had only been minutes. Alvarez scrolled. The message began, "Dr. Morgan, we sincerely apologize for the unacceptable treatment you experienced aboard your own aircraft. As the primary supplier of Global Air's executive fleet, your partnership is vital to our operations and financial stability." Then the message shifted into something even more desperate. "We request an immediate conversation with you upon landing. Additionally, we are prepared to implement emergency retraining for all crew, suspend staff involved pending formal review, offer full operational control of your leased aircraft, and comply with any additional corrective measures you require, effective immediately." Passengers stared. Even the few who had sided with Janelle earlier looked stunned. The board wasn't negotiating. They were pleading. Janelle choked back a sob. "They're doing all that because of me?" Dr. Morgan didn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, she addressed the captain. "Is there more?" Captain Alvarez nodded and scrolled again. "Yes, a final line." He swallowed. "If our response fails to satisfy you, we understand you may terminate your multi-year lease agreements. We request the chance to rectify this failure before you make a final decision." A heavy silence followed. Passengers waited for Dr. Morgan's reaction. Some fearful, some hopeful, all aware that her next words could decide the fate of thousands of employees. She took a slow breath, then she lifted her eyes to the captain. "Tell the board I received their message," she said softly, "and that I will decide after I assess the rest of this flight." Every crew member flinched. Every passenger leaned forward. The fate of the airline still hung by a thread. But just when everyone thinks Dr. Morgan is done, she calls the captain aside and reveals one final decision that will change the entire trajectory of the airline's future. As the board's message hung heavy in the air, the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Everyone was waiting, not for another corporate announcement, not for another apology, but for her. For the woman who owned the jet. For the woman who had just shaken a multi-billion-dollar airline to its core. Dr. Morgan remained still for a moment, absorbing everything. Then, with the quiet authority she'd carried since the beginning, she stood. "Captain Alvarez," she said gently, "walk with me for a moment." He nodded quickly, almost gratefully, and followed her a few steps toward the front of the cabin, just far enough that the rest of first class had to strain their ears to catch pieces of the conversation. The disgraced crew watched her like frightened students awaiting a final grade. Passengers leaned forward, unable to pretend they weren't listening. The captain braced himself. "Dr. Morgan, whatever decision you make, I understand." She studied him carefully, evaluating him not as staff but as a leader should evaluate another leader. "Captain," she said, "you did something today your crew did not." He blinked. "What's that?" "You listened." A quiet hush swept across the cabin. "You didn't assume. You didn't escalate. You didn't defend unacceptable behavior." She paused. "You tried to fix a situation you didn't create." The captain exhaled, a tremor of relief passing through him. But it didn't last long, because her expression shifted again. This time, to business. "However," she continued, "your airline has a systemic issue. Your crew's behavior is not an isolated mistake. It is a symptom." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth. Dr. Morgan glanced back at the remaining passengers, then lowered her voice. "So here is my first decision." She folded her arms lightly. "I am going to request a full internal investigation of Global Air's training program. Not a review, a complete overhaul." The captain nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, I'll relay it immediately." But she wasn't finished. "And secondly," she said, "before I decide whether to end our entire contract with Global Air." The captain tensed. I want every employee assigned to my leased aircraft to undergo a new screening process. A screening? He asked carefully. What kind? A dignity and bias evaluation, she said. Anyone who fails, anyone who shows even a hint of the attitudes I endured today, will not step foot on my aircraft again. Passengers murmured in approval. The captain swallowed hard. That will eliminate a lot of people. That's the point, she replied. Then she turned toward the disgraced crew, not with anger, not with cruelty, with truth. This was not caused by one person, she said. This was caused by a culture that allowed it. Her voice was controlled, powerful, certain. And cultures, she said softly, must change. But Dr. Morgan isn't done, because as the aircraft prepares for departure, she reveals the final, most unexpected consequence. She won't just reform the airline, she plans to take control of it. The cabin had quieted again, but it wasn't the uneasy silence from earlier. No, this was anticipation, a sharp, electric expectancy that made every seat feel like the front row of history. Dr. Morgan returned to her seat with the same calm grace she had shown since boarding, but something in her expression had changed. Passengers sensed it immediately. She wasn't just resolving an incident now. She was positioning herself for something bigger. Much bigger. Captain Alvarez stood beside her, watching her carefully as she gathered her thoughts. Dr. Morgan, he asked quietly, is there more you plan to request from the board? She looked up at him with an unreadable expression. Yes, she said. There's one final measure I intend to take. Passengers leaned so far forward that the businesswoman in 3A nearly slipped off her seat. Janelle stared with wide, hollow eyes, as if each new revelation pushed her closer to collapse. Even Officer Ricks, standing rigidly near the bulkhead, didn't dare look away. Dr. Morgan folded her hands, her voice smooth and steady. For years, she began, I've watched Global Air struggle with inconsistency, in leadership, in training, in customer care. Her tone wasn't harsh, just factual. I've watched them rely on my fleet of aircraft while failing to improve their internal culture. And after what happened today, she paused. I no longer believe the company can fix itself alone. The captain's eyes widened. What exactly are you saying? She looked up, meeting his gaze head-on. I am seriously considering acquiring a controlling stake in Global Air. You could have heard a feather hit the carpet. Passengers gasped. Someone whispered, She's going to buy the airline. Janelle nearly sank to the floor. Dr. Morgan continued, her voice level, the voice of someone already planning the boardroom strategy. My team has discussed this possibility before. Quietly, strategically. She gave a faint, thoughtful smile. And given today, events, and the airline, desperation, this may be the perfect moment. Captain Alvarez stared at her stunned. Dr. Morgan, if you became majority owner, the entire company, every route, every plane, every employee, would fall under your policies. Yes, she said simply, and that's precisely why I'm considering it. The businessman from 1C breathed. This is unreal. She's about to flip the entire airline upside down. Dr. Morgan's expression softened slightly. Captain, you may worry about your colleagues, and you're right to. But ownership changes don't always destroy companies. She leaned back. Sometimes they save them. The captain blinked, emotion flickering behind his eyes. And what will you do, he asked quietly, if the board refuses? Dr. Morgan's answer was calm, devastating, and final. Then I will take my aircraft elsewhere, and let the market show them the cost of refusing change. Passengers whispered among themselves, not about the incident anymore, but about the future. A future where the woman in seat 2A might soon run the entire airline. But before the flight departs, one final confrontation happens. And Dr. Morgan's final announcement will leave the entire cabin in stunned silence. The aircraft was minutes away from pushback. Passengers had settled, though no one dared relax. A strange mix of tension and awe settled over the cabin. The realization that they weren't just witnessing a flight delay. They were witnessing history shift. The disgraced crew lingered at the front, waiting for an escort off the jet. Captain Alvarez stood near Dr. Morgan, still stunned by her revelation of a possible airline takeover. Passengers whispered among themselves, "She's going to buy the airline. She's going to change the whole industry. She's the real deal." But then, unexpectedly, someone moved. Janelle. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling, but she stepped forward anyway, this time without arrogance, without defensiveness, just fear and regret. "Dr. Morgan!" Her voice cracked. "I know I can't fix what I did. I know I can't undo the disrespect. But before I'm taken off, please let me say something." Passengers tensed again. Dr. Morgan sighed softly. "You may speak." Janelle swallowed hard. "I didn't act that way because you're successful, or because you're who you are. I acted that way because I've been bitter, angry, frustrated with my life, and I took it out on you. That's not an excuse, but..." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I ruined my career today, and I probably deserve that, but I want you to know, I am sorry." A few passengers murmured sympathy. Others remained cold. But every eye shifted to Dr. Morgan. Her expression was unreadable, not cruel, not forgiving, measured. "Janelle," she said calmly, "you didn't ruin your career today because of one mistake. You ruined it because you believed your frustration allowed you to mistreat others." Janelle nodded, wiping her eyes. "But," Dr. Morgan continued, "I hope you learn from this, not for your job, for your future." Janelle closed her eyes, letting those words settle like both a wound and a lifeline. Then, security escorted the removed crew down the aisle. Passengers watched in silence. Once the door closed, Captain Alvarez exhaled heavily, then turned to Dr. Morgan. "Is there anything more you want me to tell the board before departure?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, one thing." The entire cabin leaned forward. Her voice was steady, controlled, final. "Tell the board this. Whether I keep my aircraft with Global Air, or whether I buy the airline outright, depends entirely on today. How the rest of this flight goes, how your replacement crew treats every passenger, and how your leadership responds when we land." The captain nodded, absorbing the gravity of her words. Dr. Morgan added one final line, the line that would send shockwaves through the aviation industry. "And tell them they are officially on probation." Passengers gasped. The businessman in 1C whispered, "She just put an entire airline on probation." Dr. Morgan sat back, buckled her seatbelt, and opened her tablet as if nothing monumental had just happened. "Captain," she said calmly, "let's have a smooth flight." And with that, the jet door closed, the engines hummed to life, and the airline's future hung in the balance, all resting in the hands of the woman seated quietly in 2A. As the jet finally rolled toward the runway, passengers whispered about what they had just witnessed. A flight crew fired, an airline shaken, and a CEO who changed everything without raising her voice. But Dr. Morgan wasn't the only black woman who had faced something like this in the skies. Because, just 1 week earlier, another young black girl in first class had been targeted unfairly. Different flight, different crew, same prejudice. And what happened on that day? Well, let us just say the flight attendant who tried to call the cops on her had no idea who was walking down the jet bridge behind her. If you want to see what happened when that little girl cried, "Daddy, I didn't do anything," and her father stepped onto the plane. Watch the next story on Black Girl Storytime. Flight attendant calls cops on black girl in first class. Freezes when her dad walks in. Things get real, real fast.